under the pale light of a gibbous moon. The sprawling Victorian mansion stands as a monument to madness and fear in San Jose, California. The structure rises from the manicured gardens like a chaotic wooden beast that consumed the logic of architecture. Turrets poke into the night sky without rhythm or reason, while windows stare out into the darkness like glassy, unblinking eyes. A cold fog rolls in from the bay and wraps around the jagged rooflines of the Winchester Mystery House. Locals whisper that the silence of the house is more deafening than the noise that once plagued it. For 38 years, the sound of hammers and saws echoed from this property, 24 hours a day. It was a symphony of construction, driven not by ambition, but by a terrified woman running from the invisible. The labyrinthine corridors inside the house twist and turn in ways that defy human understanding. Staircases rise steeply only to smash abruptly into solid ceilings, leaving the climber trapped in a suffocating dead end. Doors open onto blank walls or terrifying drops that plummet to the gardens below. This was not merely a home for the wealthy widow Sarah Lockwood Party Winchester. It was a desperate mechanical puzzle designed to confuse the vengeful spirits she believed were hunting her down. Every hallway was a decoy, and every room was a potential trap for the restless dead. The air within these walls still feels heavy with the anxiety of its creator. Visitors often report the sensation of being watched from the shadows of the spider web motifs that decorate the stained glass windows. Legend says that if the construction ever stopped, the spirits would catch Sarah Winchester and end her life. The sheer scale of the house is a testament to her immense wealth and her even greater paranoia. It contains 160 rooms, including 40 bedrooms and 2 ballrooms. Yet Sarah slept in a different room every night to evade her spectral pursuers. The layout is a physical manifestation of a mind unraveling under the weight of guilt and grief. Even today, the floorboards creak with the phantom footsteps of workers who have been dead for a century. The energy here is frenetic and confused, mirroring the endless building that took place day and night. It is a place where the boundary between the living and the dead was intentionally blurred by carpentry. To understand the house, one must understand the tragedy that shattered the life of Sarah Winchester. She was once the belle of New Haven, Connecticut, known for her beauty and her petite stature. She married William Wirt Winchester, the only son of Oliver Winchester, who manufactured the famous repeating rifle. They were a wealthy and happy couple, seemingly destined for a life of comfort and high society. However, darkness soon crept into their idyllic world. In 1866, Sarah gave birth to a daughter named Annie Party Winchester. Tragically, the infant died just a few weeks later from a wasting disease known as marasmus. Sarah was inconsolable and fell into a deep depression hovered over her for nearly a decade. She clung to the memory of her child with a desperate intensity. The shadow of death did not leave the Winchester family after the loss of little Annie. In March of 1881, William Wirt Winchester succumbed to tuberculosis, leaving Sarah a widow at the age of 41. She inherited a vast fortune of $20 million and nearly 50% of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company stock. Her daily income was approximately $1,000, which is roughly $30,000 in modern currency. Despite this immense wealth, Sarah felt cursed. She believed that the money was blood money, tainted by the thousands of lives taken by the Winchester rifle. From the battlefields of the Civil War to the skirmishes of the American West, the weapon had carved a path of death that now haunted her. Desperate for answers and seeking a connection to her lost, loved one, Sarah traveled to Boston, Massachusetts. She sought out a spiritualist medium known as Adam Coons, who was rumored to have the ability to bridge the gap between worlds. The atmosphere of the séance room was thick with incense and the flickering light of candles. According to the legend, the medium channeled the spirit of her late husband, William. The message delivered was grim and terrifying. The spirit told her that a curse rested upon the Winchester family. The ghosts of those killed by the terrible weapon were seeking vengeance. They had taken her daughter and her husband, and now they were coming for her. The medium gave her a specific set of instructions to survive. The instructions from the medium were bizarre, yet Sarah accepted them as absolute truth. She was told to sell her home in New Haven and travel west towards the setting sun. The spirits would guide her to a new home, and once she found it, she must never stop building. As long as the hammers rang out, the ghosts would be appeased or confused, and her life would be spared. If the work ceased, she would die. Driven by fear, Sarah packed her belongings and boarded a train for California. She arrived in the Santa Clara Valley, which was then a lush agricultural landscape of orchards and farmland. She found an unfinished 8-room farmhouse that belonged to a doctor named Robert Caldwell. She purchased it immediately, and the endless construction began. Sarah hired a team of carpenters and laborers who were willing to work in shifts around the clock. She did not use a licensed architect or formal blueprints for her grand vision. Instead, she met with her foreman every morning to discuss the plans she had seemingly received from the spirit world the night before. She would sketch ideas on napkins or scraps of paper, often drawing rooms that made no structural sense. The workers were paid well to follow her instructions without question, even when those instructions were absurd. They built rooms around existing rooms and added wings that blocked out the sunlight from other parts of the house. The farmhouse was quickly swallowed by the expanding mansion, which grew outward and upward like a cancerous organism. The sounds of construction began became the heartbeat of the estate and the rhythm of Sarah's survival. At all hours of the day and night, the property buzzed with the noise of sawing wood and pounding nails. The neighbors in San Jose viewed the widow as an eccentric recluse with too much money and a strange obsession. They watched as towers rose and fell, and as the house expanded into a sprawling complex of mismatched styles. Sarah was rarely seen by anyone outside of her loyal staff. She wore a black veil to hide her face and moved through the house like a ghost herself. Her world had shrunk to the boundaries of the property, and the demands of the spirits she believed were dictating the design. Inside the house, the architecture became increasingly hostile to logic and navigation. Sarah ordered the installation of staircases that consisted of 44 steps, but only rose 9 feet. The steps were only 2 inches high, forcing anyone climbing them to take small, shuffling paces. Some believed this was to accommodate her severe arthritis, but others suggested was to confuse spirits who could not adjust their gait. There were switchback staircases that turned 7 times to reach the next floor. The disorienting layout was intentional. Sarah believed that evil spirits traveled in straight lines, so she created a maze of curves and dead ends to trap them. The house was becoming a physical barrier between her soul and the angry dead. One of the most unsettling features of the house is the door to nowhere on the 2nd floor. From the hallway, it looks like any other standard door with a simple knob and frame. However, if one were to open it and step through, they would plummet 8 feet down into the kitchen sink below. Another door opens directly to the outside, dropping 15 feet into the garden. These traps suggest a mind that was terrified of intrusion. Sarah was building a fortress where the enemy could appear through the walls themselves. The workers must have felt a chill as they installed these dangerous thresholds, knowing that their employer feared something far worse than a broken leg. The house was weaponized architecture designed to maim the supernatural. Sarah held nightly séances in a special room located in the center of the house, known as the Blue Room. Only she had the key to this sanctuary, and she would enter it alone every night at midnight. The room was small and soundproof, ensuring that her conversations with the dead remained private. It is said that she wore one of 13 different colored robes for these sessions. She would ring a bell at midnight to summon the spirits, and ring it again at 2 in the morning to dismiss them. In this room, she received the building instructions for the next day. The workers often found her demands changed abruptly based on what the spirits had told her. A room nearing completion might be ordered torn down or sealed off forever. The number 13 became a recurring motif throughout the mansion, reflecting a superstition that bordered on obsession. Many windows had 13 panes of glass, and the greenhouse had 13 cupolas. The grand staircase had 13 chandeliers, and there were 13 hooks in the séance room closet. Even the sink drain covers were custom made with 13 holes. Sarah believed that the number held power, perhaps acting as a talisman to control the spirits, or as a signal of her submission to their rules. The repetition of the number adds a ritualistic layer to the house, making it feel less like a residence and more like a massive occult temple. Every detail was calculated to maintain the delicate balance, keeping her alive. The immense wealth of the Winchester fortune allowed Sarah to incorporate the finest materials into her strange creation. She imported exotic woods like mahogany and rosewood, and installed stained glass windows designed by the Tiffany Company. One particular window was designed to cast a rainbow across the room when the sunlight hit it, but Sarah ordered it installed on a north-facing wall where the sun never shines. This decision baffled the workers, but Sarah insisted it was necessary. Perhaps the spirits preferred the darkness, or maybe the rainbow was too cheerful for a house built on blood and fear. The beauty of the materials stands in stark contrast to the disturbing and chaotic layout of the rooms. As the years dragged on, the house became a self-contained city with its own gas plant and water system. Sarah was a generous employer, paying her staff 3 times the going rate and providing homes for them on the estate. However, she was also incredibly demanding and paranoid. She had a system of servants' call buttons throughout the house, allowing her to summon help from any room. She moved silently through the halls, often appearing behind servants without warning to ensure they were not spying on her. The gardeners were instructed to keep the hedges tall to block the view from the street. Sarah Winchester was building a world where she was the absolute ruler, and the only law was the one dictated by the voices in her head. The grandest room in the house is the ballroom, which was built almost entirely without nails. The walls and floor are crafted from rare woods, fitted together with intricate joinery. It cost $9,000 to build at the time, a staggering sum. Yet, despite its grandeur, Sarah rarely used it for entertaining. It remains a cold and empty space, filled with the echoes of music that was never played. The fireplace in the ballroom is flanked by 2 stained glass windows, inscribed with quotes from Shakespeare. One reads these same thoughts: people, this little world. It is a haunting phrase that seems to acknowledge the crowded nature of her mind, and her home populated by the invisible victims of the Winchester rifle. In 1906, a massive earthquake struck San Francisco and sent shockwaves through the Santa Clara Valley. The Daisy room where Sarah was sleeping was severely damaged. The fireplace collapsed, and the room was plunged into darkness. Sarah was trapped inside, terrified that the spirits had finally found her. It took her staff hours to dig her out of the rubble. When she emerged, she was convinced that the earthquake was a warning from the spirits. She believed they were angry, that she had spent too much time and money beautifying the front of the house. In response, she ordered the front 30 rooms to be boarded up and never repaired. The damage remains visible today as a scar of her terror. Following the earthquake, Sarah abandoned the front section of the mansion and shifted her focus to the back. She became even more reclusive, and her building plans became more erratic. She ordered chimneys to be built that stopped just short of the ceiling, rendering them useless. She installed skylights in the floor of the second story, allowing light to filter down into the rooms below, but creating a tripping hazard for anyone walking above. The logic of the house was fracturing further. It was as if the trauma of the earthquake had shattered her remaining grip on reality. The workers continued to hammer away building features that served no purpose other than to consume time and materials. One of the most perplexing areas is the Hall of Fires. Sarah was convinced that spirits could enter through chimneys, so she installed numerous fireplaces throughout the house. In this specific hallway, there are several fireplaces and heat sources crammed into a small space. It would have been unbearably hot if they were all lit at once. Some theories suggest she was trying to sweat the ghosts out, while others believe she was trying to provide a warm welcome for friendly spirits. The intense heat also helped with her arthritis, but the quantity of fireplaces suggests a supernatural motivation. The soot-stained bricks stand as a testament to the fire that burned both in the hearth and in her mind. Sarah also had a fascination with spider webs, which she believed held spiritual significance. The pattern appears in the leaded glass windows and in the design of the fireplace grates. To her, the web represented the connection between the living and the dead, a delicate network that she was trying to navigate. However, a web is also a trap. In building this house, Sarah had spun a massive web of wood and stone. The question remains whether she was the spider waiting at the center, or the fly caught in the sticky threads of her own creation. The motif adds a sinister layer to the decor, suggesting that entrapment was a central theme of her existence. The servants who lived on the property whispered about the strange occurrences they witnessed. They spoke of bells ringing when no one was there, and of cold spots that moved through the hallways. Sarah herself was often heard talking to empty air, having heated arguments with unseen entities. She would sometimes fire workers for no apparent reason, claiming their energy was disrupting the spirits. The staff learned to keep their heads down and ignore the supernatural activity that permeated the estate. They knew that their livelihood depended on indulging the fantasies of their mistress. To them, the ghosts were just another part of the household to be accommodated. A particularly eerie legend involves the wine cellar. Sarah was not a heavy drinker, but she kept a well-stocked cellar. However, at one point, she became convinced that the spirits were displeased with the presence of alcohol. She ordered the cellar to be boarded up and plastered over hiding it completely. It was forgotten for decades, until it was rediscovered long after her death. The darker theory is that she trapped a particularly malevolent entity inside the cellar and sealed it away to protect the rest of the house. The air in the cellar is said to be significantly colder than the rest of the basement, and some visitors report a feeling of intense nausea when standing near the entrance. The witch's cap is a conical turret on the roof that was designed to help channel spiritual energy. Sarah would reportedly stand beneath it to focus her psychic abilities. The acoustics in this small circular room are strange, magnifying whispers and creating an echo chamber. It was here that she felt closest to the other side. The geometry of the room was precise, designed to act as a funnel for the supernatural. Standing in the center of the room, one feels a sense of isolation, as if the rest of the house has fallen away. It was a lonely watchtower where Sarah scanned the ethereal horizon for incoming threats. As Sarah aged, her hands became crippled with arthritis, and her eyesight began to fail. But her resolve never wavered. She continued to sketch plans, with shaky lines, handing them off to the foreman with strict instructions. The house had grown to 7 stories at its peak before the earthquake reduced it to 4. It was a sprawling monstrosity that dominated the landscape. The sheer volume of lumber used was enough to build a small town. Sarah was single-handedly keeping the local lumber yards in business. She was consuming the resources of the living to build a sanctuary for the dead. There is a staircase known as the switchback staircase, which has steps that are oddly shaped and uneven. It is difficult to walk down without watching your feet constantly. This was another tactic to slow down any pursuit. If a spirit or an intruder tried to chase her, they would be forced to navigate the treacherous footing, giving her precious seconds to escape. Sarah's life was a constant state of evasion. She was running a marathon that lasted for decades, never able to stop and catch her breath. The house was her armor, and her obstacle course designed to keep her safe from the guilt that chased her. One of the most famous stories from the construction era involves a worker who was painting a ceiling in one of the bedrooms. He reportedly looked down the hallway and saw a figure in dark clothing walking through a closed door. Terrified, he dropped his brush and fled the house, never to return to collect his pay. Stories like this circulated among the crew, fueling the belief that the house was truly haunted. They worked quickly and kept their eyes on their tasks, afraid of what they might see in the peripheral vision. The house was not just a job site, it was a threshold to the unknown. Sarah also built a storeroom filled with expensive materials that were never used. It contained rolls of gold, embossed wallpaper bolts of fine silk, and crates of handmade tiles, valued at over $25,000 in 1900. Prices this treasure trove sat gathering dust. Sarah believed that if she ran out of materials, the spirits would kill her. so she stockpiled supplies like a survivalist. It was a hoard born of terror. The wasted luxury is a stark reminder of the futility of her quest. She could buy anything she wanted except peace of mind. The dedication to privacy was absolute. Sarah planted a dense hedge of cypress and eucalyptus trees around the perimeter of the estate. She wanted to be invisible to the outside world. However, the sheer size of the house made it impossible to hide. It loomed over the trees, a dark castle in the middle of sunny California. Local children would dare each other to sneak onto the grounds, but few made it past the gate. The reputation of the Witch of Winchester kept intruders at bay more effectively than any fence. The isolation allowed the mythology of the house to grow unchecked. In the later years of her life, Sarah's memory began to fade. She would order a room to be built and then forget about it, leaving it half finished. She would demand a window be moved and then demand it be moved back the next day. The house became a physical map of her deteriorating mind. The contradictions in the architecture multiplied. Cabinets opened into walls and balconies, overlooked indoor rooms. The chaos was no longer just a strategy against ghosts. It was a symptom of senility mixed with paranoia. The house was mirroring the fragmentation of her consciousness. On September 5th, 1922, the hammering finally stopped. Sarah Winchester died in her sleep at the age of 82. The silence that fell over the estate was immediate and shocking. The workers, hearing the news, dropped their tools exactly where they stood. Nails were left half driven into the wood. Saws were left resting on boards. The spell was broken. The fear that had driven the construction evaporated, leaving behind a silent wooden shell. Sarah left her entire estate to the ignoble rehabilitation hospital of San Francisco. But the house itself was deemed worthless due to its bizarre design and earthquake damage. The aftermath of her death revealed the extent of her obsession. The will was 13 sections long and signed 13 times. However, the house was sold for a mere $135,000, a fraction of the $5 million spent building it. The furniture was auctioned off, leaving the rooms bare. But the house was not empty. The workers and the new owners reported that the atmosphere remained charged. Doors would slam shut on their own, and the sound of footsteps continued to echo in the empty corridors. Sarah was gone, but something remained. The house was opened to the public as a tourist attraction just 5 months after her death. It was marketed as the Winchester Mystery House, and people flocked to see the madness for themselves. Yet the tour guides soon began to experience strange phenomena. They reported lights turning on and off, and the feeling of cold hands touching them. One guide claimed to see the apparition of a worker pushing a wheelbarrow in the basement. The ghosts that Sarah had spent her life trying to appease seemed to have stayed behind, claiming the labyrinth as their eternal home. Today, the house stands as a protected historical landmark, but it is still a place of unease. Psychics and paranormal investigators visit regularly, drawn by the intense energy. Many claim that Sarah is still there, wandering the halls she built to protect herself. Visitors often capture strange anomalies in photographs and record unexplained voices. The séance room remains a focal point of activity. It is said that if you stand there in silence, you can still hear the faint ringing of the bell, summoning the spirits for one last consultation. One particular hallway on the 3rd floor is known for the feeling of extreme pressure it exerts on those who walk through it. People report feeling dizzy or nauseous, as if the air itself is rejecting them. This was an area where Sarah reportedly spent a lot of time pacing, and the residue of her anxiety seems to have stained the wood. The psychological weight of the house is palpable. It is a physical manifestation of a lifetime spent looking over one's shoulder. The architecture forces you to feel the disorientation and fear that defined Sarah's existence. The basement creates a different kind of dread. It is dark, damp, and filled with the original coal chutes and boilers. It is here that the famous Wheelbarrow Ghost is most often seen. He is described as a man in overalls, seemingly still working on the endless construction. Is he a residue of the past, or a trapped spirit unable to leave his post? The basement represents the foundation of the house, both physically and metaphorically rooted in the dark earth, and the endless labor that built the structure above. The daisy room where Sarah was trapped during the earthquake is preserved to show the damage. The cracks in the walls are reminders of the violence of nature and the terror of that night. It is a room that feels suspended in time. Visitors claim to feel a sense of panic here, mirroring Sarah's experience. It serves as a reminder that no matter how much she built, she could not build a wall strong enough to keep out the reality of death and destruction. The fortress failed, but the obsession survived. Even the gardens are not free from the haunting. Statues stand like silent sentinels among the overgrown bushes. Sarah believed that the garden was a sanctuary, but even here, she designed paths that led nowhere. The confusion extended beyond the walls. At night, the shadows of the trees stretched toward the house like grasping fingers. The exterior of the house, with its mismatch of siding and chaotic roof lines, looks like a hallucination against the night sky. It is a place that does not belong in the rational world. The legacy of the Winchester Mystery House is not just in its strange carpentry, but in the story of the woman who built it. Sarah Winchester was a tragic figure consumed by a belief system that demanded her total submission. She spent her life and her fortune trying to outrun a curse. Whether the ghosts were real or merely figments of her grief does not matter. The fear was real. The house is a monument to the power of fear to shape reality. It stands as a physical proof of how far a person will go to escape their demons. As you leave the grounds, and look back at the mansion, the feeling of being watched persists. The windows seem to shift and change, as if the house is rearranging itself behind your back. The legend says that the house was built for ghosts, and perhaps it was. It is a labyrinth designed to hold things that do not want to be found. Sarah Winchester may be dead, but the machine she built continues to function, trapping the echoes of the past in its endless twisting corridors. The hammers may have stopped in 1922, but in the silence of the night, many swear they can still hear them. Tap, 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 a rhythmic pounding from deep within the walls. Is it the settling of the old wood? Or is it the spirits continuing the work that Sarah started? The Winchester Mystery House remains an unsolved puzzle, a labyrinth built of guilt, fear, and timber, waiting for the next soul to lose their way in its dark, infinite halls.